Ramadan Mubarak. Most Muslims in America will begin Ramadan this evening with special Taraweeh prayers. Tomorrow will be the first fast for many communities. Many Muslims also follow actual local moon sighting to begin their fast and may start the next day. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. This is Hena Zuberi from our Washington studios. First, the headlines. Israeli MP storms Al-Aqsa with other hardliners. Critics say return unlawfully detained Muslims for Ramadan. Halal soul food chef serves grab-and-go iftar meals. After 2 years, local MSA members gather for Ramadan. Biden orders unprecedented use of oil stockpile. West African manuscripts, how Islamic culture traveled. And now our top story. Right-wing Israeli Knesset member Itamar Ben-Gvir Thursday stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem under tight police protection. A Palestinian agency said Ben-Gvir breached the site after Israeli police agreed to allow him to tour the complex ahead of the start of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The Islamic Endowments Department said Ben-Gvir entered the site through the complex's Al-Maghrabi gate, escorted by Israeli police. In the meanwhile, a Palestinian woman was detained by Israeli forces in the Bab al-Asbat area, north of the mosque, the department said. In 2003, the Israeli government allowed settlers to storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex despite protests from the department, which oversees holy sites in Jerusalem. Here, Palestinian mourners attend the funeral of 2 men killed during a raid by Israeli security forces in the northern West Bank city of Jenin. Israelis also attended the funeral of a police officer killed by a Palestinian who was shot dead. As Ramadan begins for Muslims worldwide, some Canadian Muslims are concerned for loved ones unlawfully detained in northeast Syria. An estimated 4 dozen Canadian Muslims have spent 3 or more years detained in squalid prisons and camps for people suspected of ties to Daesh. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau released statements at the beginning of every Ramadan and visits Muslim community centers to break fast with worshippers. But the Canadian government has been criticized for abandoning those detained Canadian Muslims, more than half of them young children. Critics say they're being held in degrading, often inhumane conditions in northeast Syria. Muslim college students will return to observing Ramadan on campus after a 2-year hiatus during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many colleges have Muslim student associations and Islamic prayer rooms to support these students. Ramadan, the Islamic holy month of daytime fasting and reflection, begins at sundown Friday with the sighting of the new moon. Saturday is the first day of fasting, beginning at dawn after an early breakfast called sahur. Muslims who observe the fast abstain from eating, drinking, and sex during the day. At sunset, they traditionally break the fast with dates and water, followed by prayers and an evening meal called Iftar. Nightly prayers called Taraweeh are observed in area mosques. A chapter of the Quran is often recited every night. On Thursday, President Joe Biden announced the unprecedented use of U.S. oil stockpiles to ease the pain of rising domestic fuel prices after Russia's war on Ukraine. The measure will pump 1 million barrels of U.S. government oil per day for 6 months into the global market. Biden hopes to dampen inflationary shockwaves ripping through the American economy.
U.S. oil companies made nearly $80 billion in profit last year, and this year those profits are expected to continue to soar. This is the time, not the time to sit on record profits. It's time to step up for the good of your country, the good of the world, to invest in immediate production that we need to respond to Vladimir Putin, to provide some relief for your customers, not investors and executives.
The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is creating a Detroit-based U.S. Customs and Border Protection Community Relations position. The role is dedicated to building trust and working with Michigan's Arab and Muslim American communities and other minority groups. It took years of deliberations between various Homeland Security Administration and local community leaders to create the liaison post. The change stems from the documented ill treatment of Arab and Muslim Americans at border checkpoints and airports. U.S. Senator Gary Peters, a Michigan Democrat, facilitated the discussions. Peters and DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas recently met with leaders from Michigan's Arab and Muslim American communities to discuss civil rights issues. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled last week that Wisconsin's legislative maps that would have increased the number of black majority districts were unconstitutional. Democratic Governor Tony Evers proposed the maps, which were approved in a 4-3 ruling by the state's Supreme Court. The increased black majority state assembly districts from 6 to 7 and were opposed by state Republicans who said they were racially gerrymandered. The federal court tossed the maps in an unsigned order, saying that the state Supreme Court didn't answer whether a race-neutral alternative would deny black voters equal political opportunity. It said the rationale put forward by the lower court did not follow Supreme Court precedents in making its judgment, which cannot stand. Acclaimed British actor Riz Ahmed and his production company Left-Handed Films will partner with Pillars Fund on a new fellowship for aspiring Muslim writers and directors. Ahmed said Muslim communities in the US and UK are amongst the most economically disadvantaged. He says there's no other program like the Pillars Artist Fellowship, which invests in the talent pipeline. The initiative, sponsored by Netflix and Amazon Studios, awards fellows $25,000 each and provides mentorship from industry experts. Fellows also get access to an advisory committee of award-winning Muslim actors, directors, producers, and writers. The fellowship offers 8 months of programming, including retreats in London, New York, and Los Angeles. Chef Khalifa Kane, a halal food truck owner and caterer in Detroit, is ramping up service for Ramadan, which starts Saturday. Kane said her passion for the food service industry is fortified by the positive reactions from her food truck to her food truck and catering customers. Khalifa's mobile kitchen will offer $15 grab-and-go iftar meals during Ramadan, Passover, and Easter, all of which fall during April. She'll be selling them at 5 p.m. every day out of her storefront on Connaught in Detroit. The iftar meals will feature her specialty, halal soul food. That includes fried chicken, barbecue chicken, beef ribs, mac and cheese, candied yams, and seasoned collard greens, all of those cooked without pork products. Coming back with more news after the break, so stay tuned.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Friends, our world is pulling together like never before. We're making huge sacrifices to keep one another safe. Scientists are working non-stop to develop COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. A vaccine will get our economies moving. It will tell our loved ones we're safe again. But we have challenges we must address. Right now, huge pharmaceutical companies are keeping the vaccine research a secret. They're deciding how many vaccines get made, how much to charge for them, and who gets vaccinated. This will no doubt leave billions of people behind. Pharma companies are putting profit, not people, first. Yet, billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is funding their work. We cannot let the CEOs of a handful of pharmaceutical companies decide our future. We need a vaccine that everyone can have free of charge, no matter where you live or whether you're rich or you're poor. We need companies to share all their research so we can make enough safe vaccines for everyone. We need a vaccine owned by all of us. To end this COVID-19 pandemic, we need to pull together once more.
Dozen congressional Democrats are asking U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from cases involving the January 6th Capitol attack. Their call comes after revelations that Thomas's wife communicated with members of the Trump administration about overturning the 2020 election. The U.S. House committee probing the attack could ask Virginia Ginny Thomas, a longtime conservative activist, to answer questions about her disclosed text messages. In a letter to Chief Justice John Roberts and Thomas, the 24 Democrats from both chambers of Congress cited these published texts. They were between Ginny Thomas and then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, a former North Carolina congressman. Democrats said that the texts present a serious conflict of interest for Thomas. Dozens of youth in Afghanistan's eastern Khost province gathered to draw attention to the nation's employment crisis. They established a Department of Unemployment Affairs for those without jobs in the Mandozai district. Their aim is to send a message to the Taliban government and to bring the problem of unemployment to the forefront. More than 500,000 people in Afghanistan have lost their jobs since the Taliban takeover in August, the International Labour Organization said in January. The hardline group swept in after complete withdrawal of foreign troops and breakdown of the US-backed Afghan government. The United Nations has sought $5 billion in global funding to help struggling Afghans. A Turkish prosecutor is asking to halt the trial in absentia of 26 Saudi suspects over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The prosecutor is seeking to transfer the case to Saudi authorities. The Turkish court said Thursday it would consult with the Justice Ministry about the request and set a hearing for April 7th. The prosecutor said the case has been dragging because the court's orders can't be executed due to the suspects being foreign nationals, DHA news agency reported. This latest wrinkle comes as Turkey seeks a thaw in worsening relations with Saudi Arabia since Khashoggi's killing. Khashoggi was last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, 2018. Turkish authorities believe his body was dismembered and removed. His remains have not been found. Indonesia raises nearly $431 million from an Islamic bonds auction on Tuesday. The world's largest Muslim-majority country is planning an additional sale through a green shoe option Wednesday, its finance ministry said. Total incoming bids Tuesday were over $1 billion, around half the total in the previous auction. Most of the notes sold Tuesday carried a higher yield compared to previous sales. A database of Arabic manuscripts in West Africa, specifically in Mali, includes books collected in more than 100 public libraries, Egypt Today reports. 1/3 of all existing manuscripts, 314 titles, were written by 204 known researchers, of whom 1/4 came from West Africa. Most of the manuscripts date back to the 19th century, but have deep historical roots. Manuscripts in West Africa are not limited to the Timbuktu manuscripts found in Mali. There are also manuscripts in Mauritania, Niger, and Nigeria. The first contact between North Africa and Timbuktu occurred due to the gold trade, which brought Islamic culture across the Sahara Desert. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch.
Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad!
you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the criminal case against the Burmese junta, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. It was 2015 when 7 Nobel laureates issued a statement that what Rohingyas are facing in Burma is a textbook case of genocide. Canada came in, International Court of Justice spoke, US Congress in 2018 called it a genocide, and now the US State Department is calling it genocide. Genocide treaty requires people, countries, and nations to prevent genocide and punish. Nation seems to be behind that, except the Gambia case in ICJ, which cannot punish and seems cannot prevent because it has no enforcement. In this week, there are lawsuits being filed, and the recent lawsuit is being filed in Istanbul for criminal action of the Burmese military junta. And the person who is behind filing that is Chris Gunness. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much for having me, Malik. Thank you.
Chris is joining us from London. He's the project director of Myanmar Accountability Project. Why did you choose Istanbul to file this lawsuit instead of London, where you're based?
That's a very good question.
To have some more kebabs in Istanbul?
I didn't have time for many kebabs, actually, Malik, and we chose Istanbul because we had actually taken the case to London, and the British authorities were very clear that unless the perpetrator was going to be in this country, and it's unlikely that a Myanmar torturer will come to London, and unless the victim is in London, we could arrange that, but we couldn't have both these things, then London was not going to be a good jurisdiction. The Crown Prosecution Service here has got plenty of crimes it needs to investigate, and frankly doesn't really have the time or the resources unless there's an urgent British connection, or at least the chance of the perpetrator coming here. So we took the case to all sorts of different jurisdictions, to different places around the world, South Africa, the Czech Republic, Ireland, Germany, the USA as well. We talked to different people. And we chose Turkey, first of all, because Turkey is a signatory to the UN Convention Against Torture. And as a state party, so-called, to the convention, Turkey has a universal obligation to make sure that the treaty against torture is implemented and respected. And it doesn't matter where the torture took place. It doesn't matter where the perpetrator or the victim is. So there's that, Turkey being a signatory to UNCAT, the UN Convention Against Torture. Secondly, Turkey has been extremely sympathetic to the Muslims of Myanmar, and I think feels very strongly, quite rightly so in our view, that the behavior of the Myanmar junta is completely unacceptable, that they are committing genocide and they must be held to account. I think also there's huge public sympathy. I think there's a real sense of Islamic brotherhood and sisterhood. There's a great sense of kinship and sympathy for the Rohingyas, not just at the political level, but also I think at the popular level. I think people were appalled in Turkey by the dreadful suffering inflicted by the junta. Turkey has also been a very strong member of the United Nations. There's a very active Turkish delegation in New York. Turkey was very supportive of a robust General Assembly resolution against the Myanmar junta. It called for a global arms embargo. It condemned the coup. Turkey has also in the General Assembly voted against recognizing the credentials of the Myanmar junta. So strong support within Turkey for the United Nations processes. And very lastly, the fact that nothing else is going on internationally by way of bringing the junta to account really matters in Turkey. So Turkey is seen as a last resort. There's nothing happening in the Security Council because Russia and China are threatening to veto anything that's critical of the Myanmar junta. In the ICJ, the junta turned up and started defending itself. The International Criminal Court has also been very slow. The National Unity Government, the democratic government of Myanmar, which was ousted, they too have asked for action at the International Criminal Court. Nothing's going on. So that increases, I think, the sense within Turkey that nothing's going on to help these poor Muslim brothers and sisters, and therefore Turkey must do something.
Chris, you mentioned that British law requires that the victim as well as the criminal need to be present in UK for case to go ahead. It seems like Istanbul or the Turkish law does not require any of those two things. How many countries are there in Western Europe which does not require the criminal accused or the victim to be present, and you can still go ahead and file a lawsuit?
Well, the German jurisdiction is perhaps the most permissive, and there are very few other countries, frankly, that will consider it. In Germany, there have been cases involving Syria, for example. One of Assad's torturers has just been put in prison because he was apprehended inside Germany, but the case was going on, and there are many cases in Germany where people not inside Germany are under consideration. The truth about this is that it's all political. So ultimately, it's the Attorney General in certain jurisdictions, or it's the political echelons that ultimately make the decision. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is state immunity. So under some jurisdictions, the head of state cannot be prosecuted. So we have taken examples. We've actually filed over 20 individual names with the Turkish authorities. Some are very senior and some are actual hands-on torturers, precisely because in different jurisdictions, there are different approaches to this whole question of immunity. So to answer your question, it's political. It depends on the prevailing politics, what actually happens in the courts. And so we have crafted our approach and our file to try and match with the various jurisdictions. And as I said, we took our case to all sorts of different places, and Turkey definitely is the most sympathetic of those that we took our case to, and it's the jurisdiction which we think we have the strongest case.
But there was a case in Argentina also. How it is different from that?
Well, we decided not to go to Argentina because one of the things we're doing, apart from trying to get justice for our client, and of course it's important that our client must have their day in court, we're also trying to open up as many different battlefronts against this genocidal junta. We're trying to force legal openings in as many countries as possible. So yes, there is a court in Argentina that has said that it will hear the case of Rohingyas. They hopefully will have their day in court, and we applaud the authorities in Argentina for letting that happen. And as I say, we could have taken our case to Argentina, but to be honest, what we're trying to do is open up as many battlefronts, diplomatic and legal, against the junta. So we're also looking at the possibility of taking a case in various East Asian countries, perhaps Malaysia, perhaps Indonesia. We're also in MAP opening up a case in France against the chief executive of Total, and we have a case at the ICC in The Hague, and we also have a case in London where the junta are attempting to take over the ambassadorial residence, having taken over the embassy in London. So as many different battlefronts as possible.
Do you think, civilian filing lawsuits is going to help strengthen the international law against criminal regimes?
Look, I've been told by people who know the psychology of the Myanmar junta well, there are two things they're very frightened of. One is Buddhist karma, and the idea that by killing people and behaving badly in this world, you will have a very bad time in the next world. And that is a sincerely held belief amongst many Buddhists and amongst many military people inside Myanmar who are themselves religious and Buddhist. So you see them in the newspapers, the pro-junta newspaper, going to the temple and the pagodas and giving offerings and storing up merit for the next life. But the other thing that they're very frightened of is criminal accountability. they see themselves as great leaders of their country, and the idea that they're being accused in foreign courts of committing crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, is something which they're very concerned about. They're very concerned that if they go to some meeting somewhere in the world, that Interpol might apprehend them, they might be extradited to Turkey. So these are things that they're concerned about. And frankly, it's a lever we have to pull. The situation inside Myanmar is so terrible, is so desperate. We have to do everything we can. As I say, it's another lever to pull. And it's not a lever that's been tried. I mean, our case in Turkey is unprecedented. It's the first case in a foreign jurisdiction for a crime committed since the coup in Myanmar. The Rohingya case relates to events of 2017. Our case relates to events of now.
Tell us how this Myanmar Accountability Project, which you led, came into being, and have you done something like that in any other areas?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. I have a long association with Myanmar, or Burma as it was. I was sent as a young BBC reporter in 1988 to cover the democratic uprising, and I've stayed with the story. And when the coup happened in February 2021, I and a group of extremely smart barristers in this country, human rights barristers and others, got together and said, what isn't being done? We did what's called a mapping exercise to look at what is unique that could be done that wasn't being done. And we lighted on this idea of criminal responsibility. There are lots of people doing development, emergency assistance, political work, security analysis, and human rights work. But what wasn't being done was using the law, the rule of law, to hold the generals to account. And so we started this organization, I started this organization, and very quickly people started coming to us and saying, we've got this extraordinary case of an injustice that needs to be investigated. So slowly the work of MAP came into focus. It soon became very clear that there were urgent cases, there were urgent injustices that needed to be redressed. I was lucky enough to find a donor who's given us not a huge amount of money. I work pro bono incidentally, but we have enough money for 5 legal cases this year. In addition to the legal cases, we have a campaign, a global campaign called Junk the Junta. Junk the Junta is basically a campaign to do precisely that. It's a global advocacy campaign. It's aimed to discredit the junta wherever they try to take up their seats in UN bodies. In the General Assembly, they try to oust the Democratic Ambassador, but they're trying to take up seats in the Human Rights Council and the International Labour Organization and the World Health Organization. So Junk the Junta is aimed very much at demonizing the junta. Quite rightly, it's not hard to demonize them. There are plenty of UN reports that attest to their appalling human rights abuses. And its attempt to make sure that Myanmar as a nation, the Union of Myanmar, is represented, its people are represented by their rightful democratic representatives and not by a bunch of cruel genocidal generals who've stolen power. And by the way, although they've stolen power and they had a coup, the coup is unsuccessful. They're not in control of the country. They're not able to collect taxes. They're not able to maintain services. They don't control their borders. It's really not, the UN itself has said that the junta is one side in a civil war. So the coup has failed, and Junk the Junta is simply a campaign to make the world recognize that the generals should not have their credentials, should not find diplomatic representation, diplomatic recognition.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Junk the Junta, huh?
Junk the Junta, that's a hashtag. Hashtag Junk the Junta. Please start using it. Put it out everywhere.
Thank you for joining us at Muslim Network TV. Chris Gunness is Project Director of Myanmar Accountability Project, joining us from London. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Back to you, Hena.
That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Kareem.